Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tips, tools, and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have special guest C.K. Kelly Collins. Kelly was an award-winning publisher and former owner of a news publishing company in Nashville, Tennessee. After experiencing a divorce, Kelly made the decision to sell her company and embark on a 2-year travel sabbatical, searching for a new life, a new passion, and a new love. During her travels, she wrote her first book, The Swipe Right Effect: The Power of Getting Unstuck, where she chose to swipe right for herself and to do a little dating along the way. Welcome, Kelly. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, so you and I, we're going to talk about getting unstuck after divorce or even a breakup and how to swipe right for yourself in your life. And so, we all experience loss in many different ways, from the loss of friendships to a marriage and even our health sometimes, right? And so I know personally, when I went through my divorce of 10 years, I experienced a much different type of grief. And sometimes we get stuck in the past, not knowing how to move forward in a healthy and positive way. And so Kelly, you discuss how to examine your current state of stuck. So I would love for you to start off with, briefly sharing your story with us and how you got unstuck following your divorce.
Work in progress.
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh gosh. Well, again, thank you for having me here. My story is, I'll just start with kind of the latest push forward. But in 2017, I experienced a trifecta of really big change. My youngest daughter graduated from college. And so she was gone out of the house permanently. And then I found out that my marriage was going to end, and I'd been married for 30 years. And so that was hard. And then because of the divorce, I ended up selling my business. And so it was like, my business owner ID, my wife ID, and my mom ID were all in flux and changing. And so I just had to figure out what's next. And I stayed with the business that bought my business for 3 years. And then I retired in 2021. And that's when I did the sabbatical and then followed up with the book, The Swipe Right Effect.
That's great. So during that sabbatical, you started to travel a lot. Now, similarly to you, Kelly, after my divorce, I traveled to nearly 50 countries. It was like my way of healing. And I went on a massive sabbatical. I mean, I was still working, but I was really traveling the world a lot. And so for me, it was very healing because it got me out of my head. It got me to meet new people. It got me to see new cultures. And so why do you think traveling can be so healing after experiencing a loss, whether that's a loss of a loved one or a relationship?
I think there's, especially with the relationship, but I don't know, maybe with the loss of a loved one, but you kind of have this loss of confidence, like, especially, when a relationship fails, you feel like you failed. Most of us do anyway. And so I feel like it's that putting yourself out there. I had never really traveled alone. I had been married for so long and we had 3 kids and we always traveled as a team. And so going out there and doing that myself grew my confidence just exponentially. But I also think it is the meeting of people that you never would have met before, different cultures, different attitudes, just different outlook on life. And the hiking the Camino de Santiago, which a 500-mile hike in Spain, a very spiritual hike, was the best thing I ever did for myself. And that emboldened me to think and believe that I could take a whole year off and travel and that it would be a great experience. And it was.
Oh, that's amazing. I had a guest on my actually, I've had a few guests on my show who have done the Camino. I need to add that to my list. It keeps coming up
Yes.
for me. I just had a friend who did it, and he said it was amazing. And so, Kelly, when you started to travel, where were some places that you were guided to go?
Well, I really tried to plan as little as I could and let things come to me. The first thing I did was, kind of a lifelong bucket list thing. I went to the Grand Canyon because I thought when you see something that massive, it makes you realize how small you and your problems are.
You're
Just
right.
the sheer scale of it. But I went with my best friend. She was turning 50. And then we went up to the Utah national parks. And so that was planned. And then I went on a 30-day sailing rally, which was unplanned other than like just a few weeks beforehand. And one of my best friends was going and he needed another crew member. And so I went, I didn't know how to sail.
I
So
know. What's a
I went
sailing
as a cook.
rally?
I was the cook. It was me and four guys. And that was 30 days from Los Angeles to Mexico. And then from there, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I wanted to hike another Camino, which I did, but I didn't know when or where, because there's 28 different routes that you can take. And
Really?
but people I met on the sailing rally influenced where I went. They suggested going to South America. I'd never been there. So I went to Buenos Aires and I wanted to learn tango. So that's where you go when you want to learn tango. And I'd always wanted to hike Patagonia. I'm obviously a big hiker like you are. And Patagonia was just a big dream. And I had no idea the scale of it. And again, it makes you and your problems feel small. It's like, it's not as bad. Life is not as bad as you think it is. And it's really a small drop in the bucket that time where the pain was so overwhelming that, that you had trouble moving on. And so, the people you meet and the things you accomplish, like hiking those mountains in Patagonia was huge for me. And
I
to
can
be doing it
imagine.
alone was even, a bigger deal. So
Yeah, I haven't been to Patagonia, but I've seen pictures of it. It looks absolutely beautiful. And I agree with you on that. When I was in Athens, Greece, I remember, we were on a tour and majority of the tour wanted to go to the Hard Rock Cafe. And I was living in Orlando at the time. And I'm like, we're in Greece. Why would you want to go eat American food and go to the Hard Rock Cafe? And so I was on a mission to find just some little mom and pop restaurant with some amazing Greek food. And so I gathered, there was probably four or five of us that went on a different, excursion. And we ended up finding this beautiful little restaurant that was owned literally by a family. And they treated us like family. They sat down and ate with us, and we were there for a couple of hours. And at the time I was working in healthcare, I was so stressed and so inundated with everything going on in my life. I had just gone through a divorce, and there was a lot, when looking back at living in the States, there was a lot going on. So just having this little respite of being in Greece and having a 2-hour meal and just enjoying the flavor of the food and the scenery and the music and the people and the culture, it really did. It took me out of my head. It got me into a completely different reality. And I remember that was a very life transforming trip for me. And so, Kelly, was there any one trip that you can put your finger on that you were like, that transformed me? That was an amazing journey for me.
well, I definitely the Camino, both Caminos. The first one was the Camino Francais, which starts in France, but is mostly in Spain. And the people that I met and the way that people treat each other on that journey, it's so interesting how you can sometimes just talk to a stranger and open yourself up and share things easier than you can with people who know you and know your history and know your ex. And that people they just know who they're standing in front of them, this person who was brave enough to come be on the trail like they were.
Yeah.
And I learned really how to accept people where they were, but also to make space for people. So like what I'm a podcaster too. So what you and I do is really open the space up for people to tell a story. And that's where I first really learned. I was always a nice person. I was always somebody who would listen, but I didn't know how to not insert myself. I felt like, oh, I understand how you feel. Oh, I've been there. Oh, that happened to me. That happened to my brother, and really, if you just sit back and listen and don't say anything until they ask for advice or ask for input or just give them a hug, and I learned to be quiet and listen at a much higher level than I ever had before. And I believe that was transforming because it made me a better mom. It made me a better sister, a better daughter, a better boss. And, hopefully someday a better wife. But, it'll be, I think it'll be a long time before something is that impactful to me again, because it really did change. It leaked into my whole life.
I can imagine. And, there's no coincidence that the same letters in the word listen are silent, right? So you can kind of use both of those together. And I, like you, I was the same way when I was in my marriage. Okay, I grew up in a family that talked a lot. I had to talk over them, right? And I'm sure you did too, growing up, Irish. And so I married into a family that was very quiet, and there was a lot of moments of silence, and that felt awkward for me. And so I think, just if anything, I got out of that, a lesson that I got out of that marriage was it's okay to sit in the silence, and it's okay to not have to respond. And thank you for bringing that up, because that's something that I think we lose ourselves in our relationships. And, I know I did in my divorce or in my marriage. And it took me many years to figure out who was Tanya again. And did you go through that, Kelly, when you were like, for 30 some years you were married? And then did you go through that? Obviously you went through an identity shift after, you went through that, but did you have to go through that timeline of figuring out who you even were as an adult? Because it sounds like you were married very young.
Yes, I was married at 21. Yes, at age 52 was the first time I ever lived on my own, ever. And I
Wow.
had my first apartment. I had well, it was a little house, and then I bought my own house, a year later. And it was just this whole, wow, I've, all these things maybe I could have been doing in my 20s, I'm now doing in my 50s. And it was very exciting. If you can kind of get past all the hurt that had happened. But I do think that in the beginning, because I stayed working for the company that bought my company, so I'm still in that same thing. I stayed in the same area of town. And of course I had mostly the same friends. It started to feel like I was just living a new version of my old life. And I didn't feel like I could break out and be this completely new Kelly until I did some solo work,
Yeah.
kind of away from everything. And so that's why I decided to do this sabbatical. And it was like, okay, there's this new Kelly, but she's still kind of feeling some pain. She's still a little mad, and she hasn't truly forgiven yet. And there's these things that she needs to work on, but it's really hard to do when you're sitting here surrounded by all of the things that remind you of better times and remind you of what you lost. And so I ended up selling my house in 2021 and giving away everything. And I moved into an apartment just for like 6 months until my retirement could kick in. And then that's when I started traveling. And I learned a lot on the road about myself. But the most important thing I did was I started a gratitude practice so that I'm living in positivity, I'm living in gratitude, which also made me more generous person, helping other people while I was traveling. And it was, that change, that big shift, and not really, believing I was going to go back home. I wasn't going to go back to Nashville because it just wasn't the right place for me anymore.
Yeah.
And I say in my book, like, I outgrew Nashville, and but I didn't know where I was supposed to go. So there was just that crazy long journey of figuring that out.
Yeah, that's funny. I outgrew Florida too. That was me. I had been all over the place. And so that's a very powerful story. And I love how you brought up that, living in that town, you felt as if all those memories and all those experiences were kind of right there in your face every single day. And I moved as well. I didn't move far. I moved maybe 45 minutes away, but that little bit of a move made such a difference for me. And at the time I was working in healthcare and I had to travel through the town where I lived, and I would take the long route around. I wasn't ready to face that. I didn't want to run into my ex-in-laws. I didn't want to see my ex. But the moment I knew I was healed is when I could drive through that town and have nothing triggered
Nothing
me.
to worry about.
Nothing
Yeah.
came up. And so I had that aha moment one day. I thought, I drove through the town, nothing. And I just had no feeling whatsoever. And I was okay with it. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh, wow, look how far I've come, So have you had any moments like that, Kelly, since your divorce where you've had that aha moment of, I've healed that. I can recognize where I was and now where I am.
Yeah. I like to talk about the forgiveness factor.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
you
huge.
know, I had and I know we're going to get into the book, but there's a chapter in the book about where somebody said to me, Loretta said to me, I feel like you're still angry. And I was like, no, I've moved on. This isn't, like I've already been traveling and everything's good and I'm happy. But when your ex comes up, this tension comes over you, like you're still fighting something. And I was like, no, I'm good. And she says, no, really, Kelly. And so we went on a walk and she was saying, like, can you say like that you want them to be happy? Because there was betrayal and they were together.
Yeah.
So that was why it just was dragging me on further was, and she said, anger is like a boomerang. And I said, well, I don't feel like it's anger. I said, I do still feel pain. Like it hurts what they did. And that's still there. And she says, well, the pain, the anger, whatever you want to call it, isn't going to go away until you truly forgive them both. Can you truly say you want them to be happy? And I was like, no, I cannot say that.
I'm
And
not there yet.
so anyway, she told me to listen to the book, The Secret, because I was making this long drive up to Boston to see my daughter. And they gave me the words in that book and they explained it very fully that pain and that anger is a boomerang. And I'm throwing that boomerang out because I'm the one that's feeling it's not hurting anybody but me.
Yeah.
And in the audible version of The Secret, I was listening to that and they said, you need to say, I forgive you, I release you, I want you to be happy.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I just said it. I remember I paused the thing and I said, okay, I can do that. I can say that. And I knew I didn't feel it yet, but I knew in that moment that I was going to be able to, because I had those words and I'm big on meditation. I'm big on self-love mantras. And I thought, this is my new mantra. I love you. I forgive you. I want you to be happy. And at some point, I was able to say that to my ex-husband and it was a big moment for me, but then I realized there's still some pain there. And it took me a little bit to figure it out, but I realized I needed to forgive myself. Like I stayed too long in a place where I was not loved. I put up with things I shouldn't have put up with. I shouldn't have stopped believing that my intuition was correct. And so I had to do this look in the mirror thing and
That is
say,
not easy.
I forgive you. I release you. And Kelly, I want you to be happy. So I just try to look at that moment when I did that in the mirror, like there's the old Kelly and the new Kelly, and the new Kelly has forgiven the old Kelly and is now ready, really, really ready for that new life and that new love.
Yeah. And it's like we hold on to that shame sometimes, that shame of staying, that shame of not seeing what was going on in the relationship, that betrayal, the resentment. I had a very similar situation myself. And so, and I, like you, I did that too, but I did the EFT tapping and I did the Ho'oponopono Hawaiian prayer. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I could get the first three out. I couldn't say I love you. I could
Yeah.
not say it to myself in the mirror. I was just choking on that. And I had this massive meltdown, and So for me, I would have, before I started healing, I would have these little meltdowns. And so all of this kind of reminds me of the book, the movie Eat, Pray, Love. It was one of
Yeah.
the movies that was coming out during the time I was actually going through my divorce. And I remember going to the movie with my sister. And in the very first few scenes is when she goes and prays next to the bathtub. She goes into the bathroom and prays, and
Yeah.
God, tells her to go back to bed and whatever. And then she rolls over and tells him, I want a divorce. Kelly, I can't even begin to tell you how hard. I didn't realize I had such suppressed. This was probably 2 or 3 years after I had, my divorce was finalized. But when I was sitting in that movie theater watching that movie and she said that, all of these repressed emotions came up, and I was a blubbering mess to the point that the people behind me were throwing popcorn at me because they were like, shut up. Like, you're being too loud. And I had to get up and leave the
Oh
theater
no.
because I was a hot mess. And I didn't even realize, like you said, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. But yet
Mhm.
clearly something in that movie, I watched that movie over and over and over again. It was so healing for me to see
Mhm.
Julia Roberts go through that, but I felt so kind of entangled in it a little bit because it was very similar to my story. And so,
Yeah.
when we have those moments where you think you've healed, but then those emotions come flooding, to the surface, it can be really scary. And so, Kelly, I want to, hear some of your advice on, based off of your experience, on, what can we do before we begin dating after we have, gone through a divorce or a breakup. And I know for me, I had gone through that betrayal, the divorce, and I was on the dating scene within weeks. And I had been in a relationship for 10 plus years. I didn't know what I
Yeah.
was doing. And all I was doing was
Me too.
attracting more trauma, more trauma, more trauma. So can you share a little bit about your experience with that and some advice that, might be helpful for those going through this?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to not jump in because first of all, you've been stuck. You're so stuck and you think that dating is going to help you get unstuck. So I mean, one of the things that you need to wait for is to be able to look in the mirror and say, I love you, and be comfortable with that. Because if not, guess where you're seeking validation? You're seeking validation through the other people, not through how you love yourself, but do they think I'm pretty? Do they want to take me out again? Why, and then that's where the whole, why are they not texting? And the frustration and the insecurity and the beating yourself up and the feeling lonely. And, if you've chosen yourself and you've worked on yourself, your dating experience is going to be 10x better. I mean,
Oh, you're right.
but I think so. I mean, practical things like meditation and yoga, anything where you get into that mindset where you can just close it down to where, and then you can literally just think, I am enough.
Mhm.
I am more than enough. And that's how I started meditating. My sister-in-law gave me a bracelet and it said, I am enough. And that gave me the words to, okay, this is what I need to focus on. I am enough. That shouldn't have happened. That didn't happen because I'm not enough. I am enough, and that bracelet being on my arm, it brought up a lot of amazing conversations with people. People would see it and say, what's that about? Or where did you get that?
Uh-huh.
And I never knew where it came from. My sister-in-law gave it to me, but I think that that's really important. And I think also, especially for women, when you start dating, that you need, again, very practical, but have a safety plan. And because if you're single, you're probably living alone, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll have a roommate or something, but you're living alone for the first time in a long time. You're maybe not so safety conscious as you would have been. And I think that, having that network of either single friends or just good friends or even a family member, like, I'm going on a date. His name is John, and I'm going to meet him at the restaurant. It's supposed to be 7 to 10. I'll check in when I get back,
Yeah.
and just do really practical safety things. Do not go anywhere where you're going to be completely alone. Not safe.
And don't
Always
let
drive
them pick you
yourself
up
to a
at your
first date.
house if
Yeah,
it's a first date. Like,
ever.
don't let
And
them know where you live. Yeah.
right. and drive yourself. You don't
Yes.
get picked up on a first, second, or third date. That's
Mm-mm.
later.
Yeah. No, my
So,
friends would joke because I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. I always wanted an exit plan. Like that was always
yes,
being highly
exactly.
empathic anyway. I always wanted to be able to leave if I wanted to leave. But during
Yeah.
those dating years, it was very important for me to, because men, they want to be very masculine. They want to pick you up, but I'm like, no, let's see how this even transpires here, So that's
Yeah.
really funny. That's a great point to bring up, especially whether you're male or female. It's very important to bring that up. As I just watched the show Fatal Attraction last night, the
Did
new
you
one.
really?
Yeah. It's so I'm like, oh man, that's just really scary because,
Uh,
I'm sure for you, I mean, I had been married for 10 years. We dated for 2 or 3. So I was off the market for 12 to 13 years. And then going back into the dating pool in my early 30s is when it all started. I didn't know what was going on. And my single friends were like, Tanya, what are you doing? I was very trusting. I was very trusting. And I
well,
did not realize that my heart was getting trampled on, and so I
yeah.
was just really not, I was going to the gym, I was doing things for self-care, but I wasn't really, I was being a little naive, I think,
Yeah.
back then.
Well, and I think, yeah, and that's where the kind of making sure that you understand that you're enough and believing in yourself is really important. And another piece of advice that I got from, actually, I'm big into self-help. It was funny. I was never ever could finish a self-help book until I got divorced, and now I've written one, so it's pretty hilarious. But it's Catherine Woodward Thomas has a book called Calling in the One, and there's actually a video series course that you can take on in Mind Valley. And I thought that was, I love the idea of calling it in and manifesting that person. And one of the last things she does in the course is list a whole list of words, which we all love to do this, but list the words of what you want in your partner. And then she says, okay, narrow it down to 5. So I think I had 19. I got it narrowed down to
Oh,
5.
wow. Mm-hmm.
And then she says, okay, here's the trick. Go be those 5 things.
Yes, yes.
The only way you're going to have those 5 things in a partner is to be those 5 things
Mm-hmm.
so that you're attracting it, you know. And I just thought that was a beautiful piece of advice. And I really tried to live that,
It
you know.
is. And, had I had that advice at the time, that would have been very helpful, for me. So
Yeah.
that's why you and I are coming on the show to share this for anyone who's going through this, because, most of us, when we're walking out of a marriage or a relationship, we have a sense of unworthiness. We have a sense of sadness, maybe resentment. There's a variety of emotions that we could be feeling when we're walking away from, whether it's even short-term or long-term relationship. And
Right.
what's happening is, like you said, law of attraction, we're attracting more of that. I was attracting men who felt unworthy. I was attracting men who had inner child wounds. I was attracting men who were betraying me because that's what I was betrayed, and that I was still holding on to those emotions. And so that's really powerful that you brought that up, because if we can work on ourselves first, build our own sense of confidence, and not find our identity by finding through that validation of others, but standing and stepping in our own power and feeling
Right.
whole, then we will attract that someone into our life, because that's who we are naturally. And we'll also have healthier boundaries. I think that's important to talk about too, Kelly, is when we get out of a divorce. I think that's where my naivety came from. I just didn't have healthy boundaries. I was also very blind to red flags,
Right.
and so I was very trustworthy. I was letting people into my life that were destroying me, at the
Chapter
time. So
9.
let's move into your book. So let's talk about your book, The Swipe Right Effect, The Power to Get Unstuck. And so
Yeah.
the term swipe right became a part of our culture through the dating app, which many of you probably know which dating app that is. And so we would swipe right on someone's picture, which meant that you were choosing them. And so that's such a cute little name, that you have on your book. And so can you talk a little bit about some of the highlights in your book, and areas that maybe the listeners would be interested in hearing about, so then they will go and purchase your book.
Well, I'm just going to go right to chapter 9, red flags, like you said, because I was very naive too. And I remember I went out with this gentleman, and I'm trying to remember his name in the book. I think he was Sam in the book. I gave everybody an alias in the book.
Oh, okay. I don't even remember their real names.
Yeah. And so he said to me, I am, my daughter says I'm a jerk. My friends say I'm cheap and I'm broke. And, and there was actually a cuss word in there I was trying not to say, but, and I was like, oh, that's so funny, because my family's really sarcastic.
Oh, yeah.
And so I thought he was being sarcastic. And I have had a glass of wine with my friend, Casey, the next day. And I was like, this guy was so funny. He was saying blah, blah, blah. And she said, oh, Kelly. She said, there's this Maya Angelou quote that when someone tells you about themselves, believe them the first time. He was telling you the truth and you need to believe him. Like, oh, you don't think he was kidding? She's like, no, he wasn't kidding. And I did actually go out with him a few more times, and it was like, oh yeah, I know what it was. His daughter said he was a male chauvinist. His friend said he was a jerk and he was broke. And so it was just kind of funny. He definitely was a male chauvinist. And then another example there, I started going out with somebody that I met while they were in Nashville, and we had a blast. And he said, I don't want a long distance relationship, something casual. And I was like, well, maybe okay for a little while. But he told me multiple times, I don't want a long distance relationship. And I just kept falling back into it, even though I knew he had told me he didn't want it. And so when I tell all these self-deprecating stories
because that's what we go
people
through.
To learn from my mistakes. If somebody says that to you, believe them the first time, even though there's hot chemistry, even though he's so fun, even though you feel great when you're with him and he makes you feel beautiful. If you want a long distance relationship and he doesn't, you need to walk away. Save yourself the time.
Exactly. Because we
learned
a lot of time dating. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I learned a lot, from it, but I could have saved myself time. Time is the one resource that we cannot get back. Brene Brown, I love how she says that, but it's the one non-renewable resource. So don't give up time to people who don't match what you're looking for in a partner, who tell you something that they believe in a relationship that you don't. Just believe people the first time. So I think that's a really funny one. And another chapter there is like, what I don't want to hear, all the dumb things people say to you when you go through a divorce, like, well, they deserve each other, or you deserve better. Like, well, yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
And a year from now, this is going to be great. You're going to be just fine. Someday you'll thank them for this, because your life will be better. It's like, what?
That's not helping me right now. Yeah, that's not helping me right now.
2 or 3 years from now, you tell me that. But a week after I break up, I don't think that's a good idea. But
or the infamous, I never liked him anyway.
Yes.
And I'm like, why did you tell me that? I knew he was up to no good. And I'm like, come on,
right. Or you guys are the perfect couple. How could this happen? It was like, well, obviously we weren't perfect. So, and then, but I do talk about anger and forgiveness. One thing I should say is every chapter is a piece of advice that was given to me most of them have to do with choosing yourself and working on yourself. And so when I was doing that sabbatical and I was living in that gratitude practice, I was like, I'm really grateful that she said that to me. I'm really grateful that she said that to me. That was a turning point when she said that to me. And so the whole book came about by wanting to pay it forward, to share that piece of advice. And so I talk about what happened in my life at the time, the piece of advice that was given to me, and then I interview the person who gave it to me. So it's really 10 women's stories. They talk about how they learned the piece of advice and what they saw in me that made them want to say it. Like my friend Loretta saying, I said that to you because I lived it. I had been, she's like, I'm 7 years ahead of you in this divorce process, and the same betrayal happened to me. And it took me too long. And I want you to, it took me too long to be able to say, I forgive you, I release you, and I want you to be happy. And just different things that people said that made all the difference in the world. And so I wanted to share all of that advice, but it's kind of like 10 little mini memoirs of me and my friends.
That's a unique take. I love that. That's really, really interesting. And, because you don't really see a lot of books out there like that. It's like, oh, here's my personal story. But then there's all, I know in my situation, I had a couple of friends who were going through divorces at the time, which was really nice, because not nice that we were all going through divorces, but it was just nice to have that support there,
Sure.
from one another, to be able to get through those difficult times when,
Really is helpful.
yeah,
Yeah.
is really helpful, and to build more of like a little group, instead of going out on all these dates, like actually, building a group of gals that could get together and have fun and, enjoy each other's company. And so, I was laughing at your red flags, because I have one example that I think many women would think this is probably nice, but in my dating experience, almost every guy I went out with by the second or third date was telling me they loved me. And
Mm-hmm.
I was opposite. I was saying, I just want to be friends. I want to stay, I don't want that. Da, da, da. And they would still, by the second or third date, become very attached. And so then now looking back, I know I had at the time, I was attracting that, because I was playing at first I was very desperate, because I wanted to meet someone and I wanted to be in a relationship. But as time went on, I became very emotionally unavailable, emotionally unattached. I was flipping polarities. Actually, I was playing more of a masculine role in those
Right.
relationships. And so
Yeah.
I think we go through that as well, especially if you've been in a relationship, and now as a female, you got to do everything on your own. Naturally,
Yeah.
you put yourself into that masculine role. And so I think for, those out there too, if someone is telling you they love you by the second date, then that might be a red flag as well, because there's something within inside of them that is, looking for that relationship very desperately, whether they're the one or not. Now that I'm sure there's probably relationships out there that are like, we've been together for 80 years and he told me he loved
Yeah.
me on the first date. Okay, that's that's an anomaly. But if someone is telling you that, then it's important to feel into your body and say, okay, is this real, or what is going on here?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's funny. There's so many red flags, and I'm sure you have a whole bunch of them listed in your book. And so, Kelly, where can people go to connect with you? Where can they go to purchase your book?
Well, it's on Amazon, and I'm actually in 2 weeks, which will be mid-August from while we're talking, is I'm releasing a workbook to go with it. And it'll be called the Swipe Right Effect Workbook. And so you'll be able to buy them together if you want. And it's taking the empowerment practices from the book, but adding on to them and going deepening the dig into what's going on with your soul. My website is ckcollins.co. And I also have a coaching program, and I work with people. I have a 12-week one-on-one coaching that you can go through and just kind of walk through that workbook with me and let me help you kind of dig deeper and figure it out. It really is helpful to have someone to talk to who's been where you want to go, and that was when I was as a business owner, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was, when you hire somebody who's been where you want to go.
Yeah.
So I think that that's what coaches do. Like, we've been there, done that, and we're
Mhm.
ready to help you walk through that. And one other thing that I'm doing is a program called the Momentum Effect. And it is all about women from 45 to 65 who have that, this is not about divorced or married or anything. It's just about a change in life. Like, the kids are gone, or you've had your career, but you're just feeling a longing, something that is calling to you. And I think women think that they're broken, that there's something that needs to be fixed. Something's wrong with me. Something's missing. And what it really is, from how I understand it now, having been through it, is that is a call from your soul saying, you are ready for the next chapter. You have done all this hard work. You have done all these things. You've taken care of everybody else. And now it's time for you to figure out what your next chapter is. What is your life purpose? Create a vision around that life purpose. Create a legacy for yourself. Everything that we learn and do and experience, and whether it happens to us or because of us, is an experience that only you have had, and you have something unique to share with the world. And so I built this process based on the experiences that I've had, to let a woman walk through it. It's a 6-month program. It's got 6 masterclass teachers. They're all amazing. And I'm launching it in September. So I'm really excited.
That sounds really exciting. And I love your idea of a workbook. I think that's very helpful. I know for me, I went through the divorce care process after it was a group, and they had a workbook, and that did help me. I do remember looking. Now, it didn't help me that the guys in the group were asking me out on dates, and that's, I love the idea that you will work with someone and work them through the workbook, hopefully alone. I think it was fun to have a group of guys and girls in there, but I think that was a little distracting, at least for me, trying to move forward after my divorce and really be able to be vulnerable, right? Because part of it is we've got to be vulnerable. And like you said, you've learned how to hold space for people. And I think as you're going through that, if there's others going through divorces at the same time, no one's really holding space for anyone, right? And so you as a coach,
you need your own space.
your own space, and to have someone there who's been through it before that can hold that space too, in a way, and be able to hear you out. Because I know, as you're going through that and you're meeting other divorced people, all you're doing is bantering back and forth about your divorces, right? But when you have a coach, you're listening and you're actually applying valuable knowledge and advice and information for them to move forward. So it is very imperative, I think, for, many of you, if you're feeling stuck and you've been divorced for many years and you just can't seem to move on, reach out to Kelly. What can it hurt to talk to someone who's been through, what you've been through? And it may not be exactly the same, but still a divorce is a loss. It really is. A breakup is a loss. And so, Kelly, I really do appreciate you coming on the show. I know it's not always hard to talk about, our vulnerabilities and to be humble about it. I'm not necessarily proud of that moment in the movie theater, but I knew I had to get through that. And I'm sure there's moments where you can look back and say, wow, that was not a proud moment for me. However, that was a healing.
That was ugly.
That was ugly, but it was healing, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And that's the thing, is it's really hard to recognize that all of those little things that you go through and every little moment of just angst is actually a release. It's that. Yeah. And it's important. It's hard. And sometimes it's embarrassing, but it's important to do that.
It is. It really is. And so I appreciate your energy that you brought into the show today. And I thank you so much for all that you're doing to help men and women out there who might be going through those difficult transitions in life. So thank you for coming on the show, Kelly.
Thank you very much.
You deserve to navigate your life in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.theexistentialempath.com.